It almost doesn't seem fair that beauty and death coexist like this. That night, the wind carries the scent of jasmine, faint but real, from some unseen garden below. It feels like a message, a reminder that life persists even here. Aman Singh joins you near the fire, silent for a while. Then he says, "Scholars will argue whether this war changed the world or just rearranged its suffering." You stare into the flames. Maybe both. He nods slowly. "But we'll ride anyway." You sit together as the stars appear, one by one. Somewhere in the distance, wolves howl. Or maybe it's the wind again, bending sound into sorrow. You pull your blanket tight, listening to the whispers of men drifting off to sleep. The night feels endless, but you've learned to live inside that stretch of time, between danger and dawn, between fear and faith. And as you close your eyes, the last thing you hear is the steady breathing of your horse beside you. A reminder that you're still alive, still part of a story the world hasn't yet chosen to remember. The next morning begins in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace, but from exhaustion. A quiet born of men who've seen too much and spoken too little. You wake before dawn, wrapped in the thin chill of the desert air, and watch as the first trace of light draws a pale line across the horizon. The world feels hushed. Even the horses move slower, their breaths clouding faintly in the cool air. You stretch, feeling every bruise, every cut, every ache that's become a part of you. You've stopped noticing pain the way you once did. It's just another layer of armor now. By sunrise, the camp comes alive. Cook fires spark to life, kettles clink, and the familiar smell of tea drifts through the wind. The men move with quiet purpose, checking rifles, tightening saddles, rolling blankets. You can tell no one really expects rest anymore. The orders arrive quickly. Push further north to cut off Ottoman retreat lines. You'll be the vanguard again, the tip of the spear. No one complains. It's what the Lancers were made for. You mount up, the leather creaking under your weight, and look to your right. Captain Aman Singh gives a brief nod, eyes unreadable. Hardeep adjusts his turban, grins faintly, and mutters, "Another beautiful day to cheat death." You smirk. "Let's try to make it to sunset first." The column begins to move. The sound of hooves echoes softly in rhythm, like an old heartbeat that refuses to die. As the sun climbs higher, the heat settles over you like a heavy cloak. The road turns rugged. Stone paths broken by dry streams, clusters of thorny brush scratching at your legs. You ride through abandoned villages, their doors swinging open, walls riddled with bullet holes. Chickens scatter from the path, ghosts of a life that's moved on. You stop at one well to refill water. The bucket creaks as it rises, splashing cool relief onto your hands. The taste is metallic but pure. As you drink, you notice something carved into the stone rim. An inscription in Arabic. You can't read it, but there's a sense of longing in its curves. Aman Singh leans closer. "Probably a prayer," he murmurs. They all are, in the end. By noon, dust clouds appear on the horizon. Scouts ride back fast, shouting, "Enemy supply convoy, heavily guarded." You and the Lancers fan out, taking cover behind a ridge. The enemy wagons are visible now, slow-moving, escorted by mounted guards and a handful of armored vehicles. Machine guns glint in the sunlight. A chill runs down your spine. Horses and machine guns, two worlds colliding in a single moment of history. You can almost feel the weight of the century turning. The officers gather quickly, whispering tactics. You hear one of them say, "If we hit from the west, the sun blinds them." You nod. It's risky. Everything is. But the Lancers have made risk into ritual. The signal comes. You grip your lance, heart hammering. The sun flashes off your weapon's tip like fire. Then, the bugle. The charge begins. You ride hard, the wind slicing against your face, dust rising in waves beneath the thunder of hooves. The enemy sees you too late. Shouts. Panic. Guns turning toward the horizon. Then the world erupts. Machine guns open fire, tearing through the air. The sound is monstrous, like a beast awakening. You can feel bullets whistle past your ears, see sand burst into fountains beside you. Still, you ride, because to stop means to die. A horse beside you goes down, its rider catapulted forward. You grit your teeth and push harder. Your arm burns, your chest aches, but you lower your lance and aim for the convoy's flank. When you hit, the shock runs through your entire body. You hear the scream of men, the crash of wagons overturning. The world becomes a blur. Blood, dust, fire, sunlight. The lancers swarm through the chaos like wind and steel combined. Within minutes, it's done. The convoy burns quietly, smoke curling toward the sky. The surviving guards flee, their courage spent. You dismount, trembling. Your horse's chest heaves, foam streaking its flanks. You stroke its neck, whispering, "Good boy, good boy." Nearby, Aman Singh kneels by one of the fallen lancers, his expression unreadable. He looks up at you after a long moment. "Another miracle," he says softly, "but fewer of us left to witness it." You nod, your throat dry. "We keep buying time with lives." He glances toward the rising smoke. Maybe that's how nations are born. That night, as the fire crackles, you think about what he said. How something as vast as a country can come from moments like these, from sweat and blood and impossible courage. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the Ottoman Empire is crumbling. Somewhere else, the maps are already being redrawn. Lines that will outlive every man sitting here tonight. You lie down, staring at the stars, brighter now, as if watching. You wonder if history will ever really remember this. The sound of horses charging against machine guns. The absurdity of it. The beauty of it. Maybe scholars will argue someday whether this was bravery or madness or both. But for you, right now, it's just survival. One breath at a time. The next few days bleed together. A slow, dusty rhythm of marching, mending, and waiting. You travel through the northern plains of Palestine, past olive groves, scarred by artillery, and wells choked with sand. The war feels quieter here, but only in sound. Beneath the silence, tension hums like a wire pulled too tight. Your regiment halts near a crumbling monastery on a hill. Its walls are half collapsed, stones scattered like bones, yet a faint scent of incense lingers inside. You step through its doorway and see faded frescoes of angels and lions, their eyes chipped away by time and war. For a moment, you just stand there, your shadow stretching across the ancient floor. You can almost hear monks chanting from centuries ago, their voices echoing through the broken arches. History and war overlap in your mind, like ghosts walking the same corridor. Outside, the lancers are repairing saddles, cleaning rifles, and boiling lentils over a small fire. Someone hums an old Punjabi tune, soft, melancholic, the kind of song sung when the world feels too far from home. Captain Aman Singh joins you inside the monastery. "We'll move at dawn," he says, voice low. "They say the Turks are retreating toward Haifa. The British want the port secured before they dig in." You nod. The name stirs something inside you, Haifa. You've heard whispers of that city since the campaign began. A coastal jewel, they called it, where mountains kiss the Mediterranean. But now it's just another name on a list of objectives. As night falls, you sit with the others, your tin cup of tea warming your hands. The talk drifts between laughter and quiet reflection. Stories of home, of wives waiting, of the strange thrill of surviving when so many didn't. Someone mentions how camels have been carrying the same supplies since Basra, how the desert itself seems to be aging with them. Another jokes that if the Lancers ever make it home, they should open a tea house called the Lucky Ones. You laugh softly. The firelight flickers across weary faces, men too young to look so old. Later that night, unable to sleep, you walk outside. The sky above is an endless sea of stars. The moon hangs low, caught in thin clouds, its light turning the sand into pale silver. You think of the people who once lived here, centuries before the word India or empire or Israel meant anything. And you realize something humbling. Wars come and go, but the land remains, quiet and ancient, absorbing it all. By dawn, you're on the move again. The horses' hooves beat a steady rhythm across the hills, the cold air stinging your face. You can smell the sea long before you see it. Salt, damp earth, and something faintly metallic, like history rusting in the distance. When Haifa finally appears, it's a mirage turned real, a city built between mountain and sea, its white buildings glowing faintly in the morning haze. But there's smoke too, thin columns rising from the outskirts, where Turkish positions dig into the slopes. You halt at a ridge overlooking the city. The officers gather, maps unfold. Fingers trace ridgelines and defensive arcs. Machine gun nests, barbed wire, trench lines that zigzag like scars down the hillside. The Turks have the high ground, Aman Singh mutters, and we're on horses. You grin faintly. Sounds like every battle we've ever fought. The plan, as always, feels impossible. A frontal cavalry charge across a slope lined with machine guns. But it's the only way. The terrain too narrow for artillery. The clock too tight for waiting. The lancers prepare in silence. Turbans are tightened, spears polished, horses brushed with care, as though the men want them to look their best before facing death. Someone ties a small charm to his lance, a coin from home, wrapped in red. Another whispers a prayer. You run your hand along your horse's mane, whispering softly, "Let's outrun the bullets again, old friend." The bugle call slices through the air. The world holds its breath. Then you charge. The earth shakes beneath you. Hooves pound like thunder. Wind roars past your ears. You can see the flashes of gunfire ahead, the shimmer of metal on the ridge. Bullets cut through the air. Men fall. Horses scream. Dust turns crimson. But the lancers don't stop. They weave through fire, through chaos, through history itself. Your lance strikes true, driving into the enemy trench line. You leap down, drawing your saber, the fight collapsing into chaos. Men shouting in Urdu, Arabic, English. Smoke burns your eyes. It feels endless. But then a cry rises from behind you. The ridge is ours. And just like that, it's over. The silence that follows feels heavier than the gunfire. The lancers stand among the wreckage, panting, shaking, alive. You turn toward the sea. The sunlight glitters on the waves, calm and eternal. You whisper under your breath, "Haifa." Aman Singh rides up beside you, his turban streaked with dust and blood. He looks at the horizon and says quietly, "No one will believe this." You smile faintly. They never do. As the wind rises from the sea, carrying the scent of salt and smoke, you realize the lancers have done the impossible. And somewhere, history shifts again. The morning after the charge, the air smells of smoke, salt, and something that feels like victory. Though you hesitate to call it that. You stand on the ridge overlooking Haifa, the sea shimmering below like a dream that survived the night. The city lies quiet, its harbor dotted with ships, its narrow streets slowly waking under the pale light of dawn. The lancers move among the ruins, tending to wounded men, gathering supplies, and marking graves with spent lances. You notice how the horses stand still now, trembling slightly, their flanks streaked with sweat and dust. Some bow their heads as if in silent mourning. You walk past rows of still bodies, each wrapped in makeshift shrouds, the fabric of tents, turbans, or uniforms torn apart. The names whispered as they are laid down blur together. Singh, Maratha, Das, Gil, Sharma. Men who rode across deserts and seas for a cause they only half understood. In a land that would never know their names. A British officer approaches, his uniform too clean, his face too pale. "Splendid work, men," he says in that clipped accent, offering a nod as though acknowledging a well-played game. "You want to say something about the men who won this ridge, about the horses who carried them through hell, but you stay silent. The dust speaks enough." You look toward the city again. Haifa. The word feels softer now, like the sigh that comes after survival. Down below, the townspeople begin to emerge, cautious faces peering from doorways, carrying buckets, bread, the ordinary rituals of life, returning to a city that had seen too much. You ride down with a small patrol into the outskirts. Children follow at a distance, curious, wide-eyed. One of them, a boy with olive skin and a frayed cap, points at your lance and asks something in Arabic. You don't understand, but you smile. He grins back, his teeth flashing like sunlight through ruin. The streets are narrow and winding, lined with white limestone houses. Pigeons flutter from rooftops. The sea glimmers between the alleys, so close you can hear the waves crashing against the docks. It's strange how war and beauty can exist in the same breath. You think of the monastery, of the frescoed angels, of how some things crumble and yet still remain sacred. By afternoon, the Union Jack rises above the port. The sound of the bugle echoes across the hills. The war, at least for Haifa, is done. The Lancers gather in the courtyard of an old fort near the water. Captain Aman Singh stands before them, his turban freshly wound, his voice steady but low. "We came as soldiers," he says, "and we leave as legends. But legends don't live forever. Only what they fought for does." You don't cheer. None of you do. The moment feels too heavy for that. Instead, you bow your heads, not in pride, but in memory. That evening, you sit by the shore. The sun dips into the Mediterranean, painting the sky in strokes of gold and violet. The water glows like molten glass. You can hear laughter from some of the men nearby. Someone has found a harmonica. Another is making tea over a camp stove. You think of home, the fields of Punjab, the smell of rain on dry earth, the laughter of your mother, the deep sound of temple bells at dusk. For the first time in months, you allow yourself to imagine returning there. Aman Singh joins you again, handing over a cup of tea. "You know," he says, gazing out at the horizon, "when people talk of this war, they'll speak of generals and maps and treaties, not of men like us." You take a sip, the tea sharp and smoky. "Then maybe one day someone will tell it right," you reply. He smiles faintly. "Maybe." The two of you sit in silence, watching the last light fade. Seagulls circle above the water, their cries echoing softly. You realize that even if the world forgets this battle, the land won't. The earth remembers, always. When night falls, the city lights flicker to life. Small, golden dots scattered along the coastline. For a moment, it feels like the stars have descended to rest upon the sea. You close your eyes and breathe, deeply, slowly. The air tastes of salt and ashes, but also of peace. And as sleep begins to pull you under, you think of the horses galloping toward fire, of the brothers who didn't return, of the strange, quiet glory of surviving. Far away, the world continues. Maps are redrawn, empires shift, and a new nation begins to take form upon the ashes of the old. You don't know it yet, but Haifa will one day be remembered, not just for the port or the hills, but for the charge of men who came from across the ocean and changed its fate. The wind whispers across the sand, carrying your name, your story, into history's long, uneven rhythm. The next morning arrives slow and golden. The war feels like a distant echo now, but you can still hear it under the surface of everything. In the clipped hoofbeats on cobblestone streets. In the way soldiers still glance toward the horizon, as if expecting another enemy to rise from the dust. You wander through Haifa's narrow alleys, the smell of bread and seawater replacing gunpowder and blood. The markets have reopened. Fishermen mend their nets beside battered walls, and women draw water from wells still flecked with ash. The city breathes again, hesitant, fragile, alive. You're wearing a faded tunic now instead of armor, your lance sheathed and dusty, your turban streaked with salt. It's strange how quickly war transforms into memory, like a fever dream that leaves your skin cold afterward. One of the British officers, Major Houghton, meets you at the port, where cargo is being unloaded from ships flying Union Jacks. "You chaps did fine work," he says briskly. Cavalry against machine guns. Quite a show of spirit. You almost laugh. Spirit. That's what they'll call it in their reports. Spirit and courage, the polite words that hide sweat, screams, and the smell of burnt leather. He tells you that dispatches are being sent to London, and commendations will be written for the Indian Lancers. But you can see it already, how those lines will read in history books. The British captured Haifa with brave cavalry charges. No mention of the men, whose names won't fit the Western alphabet. As you turn away, you spot a group of locals watching from a distance. Men in loose robes, children clutching each other's hands. They don't know whether to cheer or mourn. Haifa has changed masters many times, and each time, the city learns a new language of survival. You ride back to the encampment near Mount Carmel, where the horses graze lazily in the scrub. The mountain looms over the plain, green and silent. The air here feels older, as though every stone has seen centuries of battle and prayer. That night, a faint rain begins to fall. You stand outside your tent, face tilted to the sky, letting the drops wash away the grime of war. Lightning flickers in the far distance, and for a moment, you think of the enemy. The Turks who fled, the Germans who advised them, the men who, like you, probably just wanted to see another sunrise. You whisper a small prayer, not for victory, but for rest. Later, a courier arrives from the British command, bringing word from Cairo. There's talk of new borders, new nations being drawn from the bones of the old Ottoman world. This region, he says, tapping a map, will never be the same again. You study the lines on the parchment, arbitrary strokes made by men who will never set foot here. The borders of tomorrow, sketched in ink today. One of your comrades, Naik Himmat Singh, laughs softly. "So many people want to own this land," he says, "but none of them know how heavy it is." He's right. The ground here feels burdened with prophecy, blood, and endless argument. As the days pass, the Lancers begin to pack up. Their task is done. The horses are tended to, the wounded sent to field hospitals. Some men write letters home, though they don't know if the mail will ever reach their villages. You write one too, to no one in particular, just to the world. You write about the charge, about the sand whipping in your eyes, about the sound of thunder that wasn't thunder. You write that courage is quieter than people think, that it sounds like breathing through fear, like whispering a name before the impact hits. When the letter is done, you fold it neatly and tuck it inside your tunic. Maybe someone will find it someday. Maybe no one will. But it feels right to leave a trace. On the final evening before departure, the men gather around a small fire. Someone starts humming an old folk tune, something from Punjab, soft and lilting. One by one, others join in. The sound drifts up into the night like incense. Captain Aman Singh speaks last, his voice low but steady. "The war gave us no medals worth wearing," he says, "but it gave us stories worth remembering. If not by others, then at least by us." You watch the fire burn lower, sparks floating into the darkness, like lost souls finding their way home. The Mediterranean hums quietly beyond the dunes. Before turning in, you look one last time toward the city, Haifa, glowing faintly under a silver moon. Somewhere out there, people are lighting lamps for the first time in weeks. Somewhere, a new chapter is beginning, though no one knows what kind of story it will be. You tighten your cloak around your shoulders and lie back, feeling the cool sand beneath you. The stars above look ancient and indifferent, the same ones that watched Alexander, Saladin, Napoleon. You wonder if they remember the men who came and went beneath them. As you drift towards sleep, you realize something quietly profound. Wars don't end with victory. They end with silence. And in that silence, the living must decide what to remember and what to forget. The waves crash faintly in the distance, rhythmic, patient. You breathe in time with them. The charge is over. The dust has settled. But the story, your story, has only just begun to echo. You wake before dawn, to the murmur of distant voices and the scent of damp earth. The camp is stirring, horses snorting, boots shuffling, men rolling up their blankets with quiet efficiency. Today is departure day. The War of Haifa, for most of the world, is already over. But for you and the other Lancers, it still lingers in the air like smoke that refuses to fade. You stand beside your horse, an old chestnut mare, with a scar near her flank from the battle. You run a hand along her neck, feeling the tremor of muscle beneath. She flinches at the sound of a hammer striking metal somewhere in the distance, blacksmiths repairing wagons. She still remembers the roar of machine guns. Maybe she always will. The morning light spreads over the plain, thin and pale. You can see Haifa in the distance, the sea behind it like a sheet of tarnished glass. The city seems peaceful now, but you know peace is never simple. It's a pause between storms. You mount up and join the slow procession toward the port. The Lancers ride 2 by 2, flags drooping, eyes fixed ahead. Some hum quietly to themselves, others whisper prayers. A few laugh, soft, uneasy laughter that feels borrowed. At the harbor, British officers oversee the loading of supplies. Crates of ammunition, rolled maps, and bundles of reports, all labeled and sealed. You notice how organized everything looks. So neat, so bureaucratic. Nothing like the chaos you've lived through. Paper and ink will decide how this war is remembered. A clerk, young and pale, stops you as you dismount. "Name?" he asks briskly, quill ready. You tell him. He frowns, asks you to spell it twice, then shrugs and scribbles something half right. "Next," he mutters, already moving on. And just like that, another piece of your identity becomes an administrative error. You walk to the water's edge, where the waves lap against the stones. The sound is calming, repetitive, eternal. You kneel, scoop a handful of seawater, and watch it drip through your fingers. It feels strange to touch something that existed before the war and will exist long after it. Nearby, Captain Aman Singh stands with Major Houghton, discussing logistics. You catch fragments of their conversation. Words like mandate, territory, future administration. The British are planning borders again, cutting across deserts and mountains, as though lines can tame history. You wonder if anyone here truly understands the weight of what's coming. Palestine, Houghton says, rolling the word around his tongue as if testing it. There'll be trouble here one day, mark my words. This land doesn't rest. You glance toward the horizon. The hills shimmer faintly in the morning sun, their edges blurred by dust. It's a beautiful land, yes, but restless, layered with too many stories. Empires come here not to rule, but to argue with ghosts. A few yards away, Naik Himmat Singh is feeding his horse a piece of stale bread. "You think anyone back home will believe this?" he asks. "That we fought tanks with lances?" You smile faintly. Maybe they'll laugh. Or maybe, he says, tossing the crust into the sea, they won't believe it at all. There's a silence between you, filled only by the sound of gulls. It's the kind of silence that feels heavier than words. Later, as the ships are prepared, you help load the last of the supplies. The port smells of salt and oil and sweat. Men shout in half a dozen languages: English, Urdu, Arabic, Punjabi. For a brief moment, the entire empire seems condensed into this single chaotic dock. You spot a small group of local children watching from behind a stone wall. One of them waves shyly, holding a tiny wooden horse. You wave back, and for some reason, that small gesture hits you harder than the medals or the speeches. Maybe this is what remains after war, the human fragments that refuse to disappear. As the ships begin to move, you and the others mount up one final time. The lancers line the shore, spears glinting in the light. The sea breeze catches the flags, making them ripple gently. Major Houghton gives a final salute from the deck of his transport. "Good show, men. History won't forget this," he shouts. You almost laugh at that, because, deep down, you know history will forget. History has a short memory and selective hearing. It forgets the accents that don't fit, the names that can't be pronounced, the brown faces beneath khaki turbans. When the last ship disappears over the horizon, you turn your horse inland. The rest of your regiment follows slowly, hooves stirring up little clouds of dust. The road winds back toward the hills, away from the sea. As you ride, you can't help but look back one last time. The city of Haifa gleams faintly in the distance, its domes catching the sun. You remember the sound of gunfire echoing through its streets, the thunder of hooves on sand, the glint of bayonets under the sun. You remember everything, and for a moment, you feel both proud and hollow, like a flame that has burned too bright and now flickers quietly. That night, when the camp settles, you sit alone by a small fire. The sky is full of stars, and the air smells of dust and smoke. You pull out the folded letter from your tunic and read it again under the firelight. The words feel distant now, written by someone who doesn't exist anymore. You tear the letter into small pieces and let the wind carry them away. Somewhere beyond the reach of the firelight, a jackal howls. The horses shift restlessly. You lie back and stare at the sky until your eyes blur. That's it. The war has ended, but it still lives inside you, in the rhythm of your heart, in the way your hands sometimes shake when you hear thunder. You think of home, of the fields of Punjab after the rain, of the faces that will never hear the real story of what happened here. Maybe that's all right, you whisper to the dark. Maybe not all stories are meant to be told loudly. The fire crackles softly. The night holds its breath. The morning breaks pale and cloudless. You stir awake to the low sound of camels in the distance, traders moving through the same paths where armies once marched. The war is already retreating into rumor. A month ago, you were part of something that felt larger than life. Now, it feels like something the world is already misplacing, like sand slipping through fingers. You ride with a small convoy toward Damascus, part of a larger movement of troops being reorganized. The British call it redeployment. To you, it feels like exile. The land changes as you travel. The air grows sharper, the hills more severe. Villages come and go, each scarred in its own way. Children stare from doorways, silent, curious. Their eyes seem older than their faces. The men are quieter now. Talk drifts only in fragments, of letters home, of food, of what might come next. War breeds noise, but peace breeds hesitation. Nobody is sure what silence should sound like. As the sun climbs, you pass a long, flat plain scattered with debris. The skeleton of a German supply truck lies overturned, rust biting into its frame. A British soldier points it out. "See that?" he says. "They thought machines would save them." His voice holds something between pride and fear. You wonder if he realizes how close you all came to being crushed beneath that same idea. The Lancers, men trained for horse and spear, are relics in a world now worshipping steel and gunfire. You can feel it. The shifting of eras. The slow erasure of everything familiar. Scholars will someday write about this war as the twilight of cavalry. Some will say the Battle of Haifa was its last breath. Scholars still argue whether that charge was bravery or desperation. But you were there. You know it was both. By midday, you halt near a broken aqueduct. The horses drink greedily, their reflections trembling in the muddy water. You sit on a stone ledge and pull a scrap of dried bread from your satchel. It's stale, but it tastes of home, wheat and sweat, a reminder of Punjab's earth. Captain Aman Singh joins you, his face drawn. "Orders from command," he says quietly. "They're sending us back through Suez, some to Cairo, some further east. They're calling this region a protectorate now." He laughs softly, the sound brittle. Protectorate. I wonder who they're protecting. You nod, but say nothing. Words feel small in the face of what's unfolding. As the convoy moves again, you notice a stretch of the plain dotted with graves. Small mounds marked by makeshift wooden crosses and stones. No names, only numbers and dates scrawled in fading ink. The British, the Turks, Arabs, Indians, all buried side by side by a war that didn't care who they were. You dismount and kneel beside one of the mounds. The earth is dry, cracked. You whisper something, though you're not sure to whom. Maybe to the man beneath, maybe to yourself. The wind carries it away. By dusk, the camp is set on a ridge overlooking a valley. Fires bloom one by one like stars. You watch the horizon glow orange as the sun dips behind the hills. A soldier nearby strums a sitar, soft, hesitant notes that sound almost like a prayer. The tune drifts through the air, mingling with the smell of wood smoke and the sea far beyond. Later, in the flicker of the fire, Captain Aman reads aloud a message received by courier, a speech by General Allenby praising the capture of Haifa and the valor of the cavalry. He names British regiments, Australian divisions, and then, briefly, the Indian forces. The men listen in silence. When the speech ends, the fire crackles louder than their breathing. Naik Himmat Singh breaks the silence. "Maybe that's enough," he says. "Maybe all we ever needed was to know we were there." You look at him and see something steady, something unshaken. You realize he's right. The world might forget your names, but it can't erase your footprints. The desert holds memory better than ink ever could. Before turning in, you walk away from the camp to a high ridge. The stars spill across the sky, impossibly bright. You think of all the soldiers scattered under this same sky, some alive, some buried, all part of a story too large for one lifetime. You whisper the words that have followed you since the charge. We rode where others would not. It isn't pride you feel, it's clarity. You understand now that courage isn't loud. It's the quiet step forward when fear says stay behind. A shooting star streaks across the sky. You follow its arc until it disappears behind the hills. Somewhere beyond that horizon, ships are sailing home, and new nations are being born. You stay a little longer, letting the night settle around you. The air tastes of dust and salt, the eternal flavor of hist. The next morning arrives not with trumpets or orders, but with stillness. You wake to the faint hum of flies, the low snort of a horse, and the sigh of wind weaving through canvas tents. The war, it seems, has grown quieter, too quiet. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness in your bones, a reminder that you're not made of the same steel the world now worships. You look around and see the same tired faces, men whose eyes are always turned east now, toward the long road home. But home feels distant, almost mythic. You can see it in their posture, the uncertainty of men who have survived something that the world will soon fold into footnotes. When breakfast comes, lukewarm tea and coarse biscuits, you share it with Himmat Singh and a young recruit named Dharam. He's only 17. His turban's still too large for his head. He asks, "Do you think they'll remember us in Delhi?" You look at him for a moment before answering. Maybe not right away. But someday, when they look for the men who rode through fire, they'll find us there. He smiles faintly, though you can tell he doesn't believe it. By midday, the unit begins to move again. Orders are clear now. Withdrawal toward the ports. Regrouping before reassignment. The landscape changes as you descend from the ridges into the fertile valleys beyond. The soil grows darker, green patches breaking the monotony of stone and sand. The scent of olive trees drifts on the wind. As you ride, you pass through villages rebuilt over ruins. New homes stacked atop broken Ottoman foundations. You see children chasing goats through streets where bullets once sang. The contrast feels surreal. Life is impatient. It rushes in before the echoes of death have even faded. At one crossroads, a group of Arab women stands silently, holding small earthen pots filled with water. They offer them to passing soldiers without words. When you reach them, one woman nods to you, her face lined but calm. Her eyes linger on your horse, its coat scarred by the Haifa charge. She murmurs something in Arabic, a blessing perhaps, and you nod in return. For a fleeting second, it feels like peace. The convoy stops at an old Ottoman outpost by the coast. It's a ruin now. Half-collapsed walls, broken gates, wild grass overtaking everything. But the British officers set up headquarters there anyway. Because hierarchy needs walls, even if they're crumbling. Captain Aman Singh is summoned inside, while you and the men wait outside under a fig tree. The air is heavy, thick with salt. You listen to the waves crashing below the cliffs, and think of how close those waters are to home, yet how far you still remain. When Aman returns, his expression is unreadable. "They're disbanding parts of the cavalry," he says finally. "Some of us will go home. Others might stay, as peacekeepers," they said. Palestine, Syria, who knows? Himmat Singh spits into the dirt. "Peacekeepers," he mutters. "They make wars, then hire us to guard the ruins." No one laughs. The truth of it lands heavy between you all. That night, you sit apart from the others near the shore. The sea roars endlessly, a dark mirror beneath the stars. You take off your turban and let the wind cool your scalp. It feels good, humbling even. You remember your first day of enlistment years ago, when the uniform felt like armor and the world seemed simple. Orders, loyalty, glory. But here, at the edge of a land reshaped by blood, glory feels hollow. You realize something quieter but deeper has replaced it. Understanding. A soft rustle interrupts your thoughts. Dharam walks up behind you, hesitant. "You think we'll be sent home soon?" "Maybe," you say. "But home isn't always where you left it." He looks confused. You can't blame him. Some lessons, you think, can't be taught in words. They come to you in the silence after the gunfire. A distant light flashes on the horizon. Perhaps a ship, perhaps lightning. You watch it fade, leaving behind only the rhythm of the waves. Somewhere behind you, soldiers sing softly in Punjabi. a low, haunting melody that drifts across the sand. You can't make out all the words, but you know the tune. It's one of return and remembrance. As the wind carries the song out over the water, you whisper along, "Ride on, brothers, where the stars lead the way." For a moment, the past, the war, the loss, all of it folds into something almost beautiful. You lie back on the sand, close your eyes, and let the world move without you. The waves keep coming, eternal and indifferent, just like history itself. The morning sun creeps up slow. Like it too, is tired of witnessing men break and rebuild the same world. You rise with the others, brushing the sand off your uniform, your boots filled with salt and memory. The air smells of rust and seaweed. Horses shift uneasily. They know change when it's coming. The orders arrive shortly after dawn. Prepare for transport. Haifa port. British command has requested a ceremony. That word, ceremony, feels strange on your tongue. What could possibly be ceremonial about leaving a war behind? As you march toward the port, the road is lined with fragments of another empire. The Turks' old telegraph poles, Ottoman signs half-eaten by time, bullet holes turned into nesting spots for sparrows. The wind carries a strange mix of scents: diesel, salt, and oranges from the nearby groves. Haifa greets you like a mirage. Blue sea, white buildings, the faint call of gulls. It's hard to believe this city was a battlefield just weeks ago. The rubble is still there, sure, but life has already begun its quiet rebellion. Fishermen mend nets beside the same pier where soldiers once bled. Children run barefoot, chasing each other between broken carts. You dismount near the docks where ships bob lazily against the tide. The British flag flaps above the headquarters, and officers in crisp uniforms bustle about, their voices sharp and cold. For them, this is a line in a report, a footnote in empire. For you, it's the end of something sacred. Captain Aman Singh gathers the men in formation. The lances gleam again, polished for the occasion. Their tips catch the sunlight and scatter it like memory itself. Bright, blinding, fleeting. The ceremony begins. A British colonel steps forward, reading from a script that feels too rehearsed, too detached. The valor of the Indian Lancers at Haifa shall forever be remembered. You stand at attention, the words washing over you, like rain on old armor. You glance sideways and see Himmat Singh standing rigid, his jaw set, eyes distant. Dharam fidgets slightly, trying to hold his salute just right. And then, something unexpected. One of the British officers, a young man barely older than Dharam, steps forward and removes his cap. To the men who charge through fire, he says, voice low but trembling, "We owe you more than history will ever admit." The words hang in the air. The colonel doesn't look pleased, but no one stops the young man. For a heartbeat, truth slips through the cracks of ceremony. You lower your lance, and as the order echoes dismissed, you feel a heaviness lift, replaced by something quieter. Relief, maybe, or simply exhaustion. The soldiers scatter, some to ships, some to warehouses, others to rest under calm trees. You find yourself drawn to the water's edge. The sea is calm, almost unnaturally so. You crouch and trail your hand through it. It's warm, alive. It doesn't care who won or lost. Nearby, an old Arab fisherman hums as he repairs a net. He looks up at you and smiles, toothless but kind. "You go home now?" he asks in broken English. You nod. "If they let us." He chuckles softly, tying another knot. "Home is here," he says, tapping his chest. "Not there." You don't answer. The simplicity of his truth feels too heavy to carry just yet. That night, you and the remaining men set up camp on the outskirts of the port. The stars burn fiercely above Haifa's hills. Fires flicker. Laughter bubbles up here and there. And for the first time in months, there's no sound of gunfire. only the rhythmic murmur of waves and the rustle of wind through olive trees. You find Darum sitting apart, sketching something in the dirt with a stick. "What's that?" you ask. He looks up sheepishly. "A horse," he says. "My horse. I want to remember her when I go home." You smile. "Draw her with wings," you say, "so she can always run free." He grins and does exactly that. The night deepens. Someone starts singing again, a slow tune this time, more a hum than a song. You lie back, eyes tracing constellations. Orion, Cassiopeia, stars older than any war, still burning quietly above men who think themselves eternal. Scholars still argue, you think, whether history remembers heroes or only survivors. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe both fade. The ship rocks gently as dawn stains the horizon pink. You stand at the rail, watching the coastline of Haifa shrink into a soft blur, like a memory dissolving in water. The seagulls follow for a while, then peel away, their cries fading into the sound of the waves slapping against the hull. You're leaving the war behind, or at least the geography of it. But the war itself stays, tucked somewhere between your ribs. You can feel it, even as the sea breeze cools your face, as if it's stitched into the very fabric of your uniform. The deck smells of oil, sweat, and salt. Soldiers lounge in small groups, some playing cards, others staring at the horizon with hollow eyes. A few of them talk about home, about wives who sent letters that may never have arrived, about fields waiting to be plowed again. There's laughter too, though it sounds brittle, like glass. Captain Aman Singh passes by, his posture still rigid despite the weariness. "Keep your spirits," he says softly. "We carry more than medals now." You nod, not entirely sure what he means, but the truth of it feels heavy and real. As the day unfolds, the ship sails past calm waters. You see dolphins cutting through the surface, silver arcs of life in the endless blue. For a fleeting second, the war feels far away, another planet entirely. But when you close your eyes, the flashes return, the smoke, the whinny of dying horses, the thundering sound of machine guns. The mind doesn't let go that easily. By noon, the sun blazes overhead. The sea seems to burn white. You retreat below deck for shade, where the air is thick and smells faintly of iron. The men are restless. Some hum old Punjabi tunes. Others whisper prayers in Urdu or English. Languages swirl together, weaving a strange harmony, a chorus of tired hearts. Daram leans against a barrel, reading a torn newspaper. "They're saying the war's over," he mutters. "Armistice signed." You raise an eyebrow. "So we fought the last battle of the war?" He nods slowly. "Looks like it." The words hang in the air. The last battle. It sounds almost absurd, like the ending of a story that doesn't know it's supposed to end. Later, as the evening light softens, you return to the deck. The Mediterranean has turned golden, a sheet of light stretching endlessly. In that moment, you remember the fisherman's words, "Home is here." You wonder if he was right. A British officer joins you at the rail. You recognize him, the young one who had spoken truth during the ceremony. "Fine work, back there," he says, lighting a cigarette. "You lot did what no one thought possible." You smile faintly. "We just rode." He exhales smoke, watching it curl into the wind. "You know," he says, "most people will never hear about Haifa. Not properly. Reports are brief. The newspapers focus on the armistice. The world likes simple endings." You glance at him. "And this wasn't one?" He chuckles dryly. "No, wars never end cleanly. They fade, like saltwater stains on steel." You both stand in silence after that, the kind that doesn't need filling. As night falls, lanterns flicker to life across the deck. The ship becomes a floating constellation, drifting through the dark. You sit with your men, sharing the last of the rations, someone passing around a battered tin cup of tea. The stars above feel impossibly close. The sea reflects them so perfectly, it's hard to tell where sky ends and water begins. It's as if you're suspended between two infinities, one above, one below. You think about all the men who won't see this night, about the horses buried in foreign soil, about the forgotten charge that broke the unbreakable. Scholars still argue, you murmur to yourself, whether courage is born of choice or desperation. Maybe it's both. Maybe it doesn't matter. What matters is that for one shining instant, humanity overcame its own machines. The waves hum a slow rhythm, like a lullaby. Someone hums along softly. The sound drifts, mingling with the wind. You close your eyes and breathe deep. The salt, the smoke, the faint echo of drums from memory. It all folds together until it feels like a dream you might wake from or never need to. Tomorrow, there will be new orders, new borders drawn, new nations born. But tonight, between the water and the stars, you're just a name carried home by the wind. Morning returns with the hush of a sleeping sea. You wake to the slow sway of the ship and the dim light filtering through the cabin's porthole. The war feels far now, like something that happened to someone else in another life. You lie still for a while, listening to the creak of wood and the low hum of the engines. Somewhere above deck, gulls cry, a sound that feels too alive after everything that's been silenced. When you finally step outside, the deck glows under a pale sun. Salt glitters on the railings, and the air tastes clean. The men move slowly, as if relearning what peace feels like. A few are shaving with cracked mirrors. Some polish their boots. Others simply stare out at the horizon. It's quiet, but not heavy anymore. You find Captain Aman Singh sitting near the bow, his turban catching the wind, his gaze far away. For a moment, he looks less like a soldier and more like a man remembering something private. Perhaps his village, or the warmth of a monsoon. You sit beside him without a word. The silence feels like shared understanding. Finally, he speaks. Strange thing, isn't it? You survive all that chaos, and suddenly, there's nothing left to fight. Feels empty. You nod. Maybe we don't know what to do without the noise. He smiles faintly, eyes still on the horizon. Maybe. But noise isn't life. Peace. That's harder. It takes more courage, I think. The ship sails smoothly, slicing through gentle waves. By noon, a faint outline of Alexandria begins to emerge. Egypt's coast, sun-soaked and shimmering like an illusion. The men crowd at the rails, pointing, laughing, some even cheering. The sight of land has never felt so miraculous. But beneath the laughter, there's hesitation too. Because what waits beyond land is not home, not yet. There are still ports to pass, forms to sign, trains to catch, months before the Indian soil feels under your feet again. You catch yourself thinking about Haifa, how the light fell on the ruins, how the horses thundered through sand and smoke, how death was closer than breath. And now, here you are, alive, floating between two continents. When the ship anchors at Alexandria, the heat is a shock. The air smells of spice, sweat, and seaweed. Crowds gather along the harbor. British officers, Egyptian workers, a swirl of uniforms and languages. Orders are shouted, crates are unloaded, and for the first time in months, your boots touch steady ground. The docks are chaos, yet strangely comforting. You walk through it with your kit slung over your shoulder. The horses are led off carefully, hooves clanging on the ramps. They look uneasy, confused by the noise and sun. You pat one on the neck, whispering softly. It exhales, eyes heavy with fatigue. That night, the men are billeted in a makeshift camp outside the city. Palm trees sway in the warm breeze. You sit near a fire, its glow flickering on familiar faces. Someone tells a joke about how the British rations never improve, even after victory. Laughter rises, brief but genuine. A radio crackles nearby. Static first, then a distant voice reading the news. The Great War is ending. The Ottoman Empire is crumbling. New maps are being drawn in rooms, far from the dust and blood where men like you fought. You wonder if they'll remember the cavalry. Aman Singh looks up from the fire. They'll write their books, he says quietly. They'll talk about tanks and trenches, but not us, not Haifa. You sigh. History forgets the hooves. Unless someone remembers, he adds, looking at you. The embers reflect in his eyes, small, glowing suns. You've seen it. You can tell it. The night deepens. The desert beyond the camp stretches into silence. The stars above are so sharp, they look carved into the sky. You lie back on the sand, the warmth of the day still clinging to it. And for the first time in years, sleep comes without dreams of battle. Before your eyes close fully, you hear the distant sound of hooves. Not real maybe, but memory echoing through the dark. It fades slowly, blending with the rhythm of the wind. Peace feels strange, fragile, but it's here. And for now, that's enough. Weeks pass before you reach India. The journey home stretches like an endless thread, port to port, train to train, the air changing from salt to dust to the scent of monsoon earth. Each stop feels like another layer of distance between war and home. And yet, part of you knows the war will travel with you forever. When the troop train finally pulls into Bombay, the platform is chaos. Steam hisses, whistles echo, and crowds press forward, waving flags and shouting names. Women in bright saris, children perched on shoulders, men holding garlands of marigold and jasmine. The colors are dizzying after so many months of khaki and gray. You step down from the carriage and blink against the sun. It's too bright, too alive. A garland lands around your neck, and the smell of flowers feels almost strange. Too soft, too forgiving. Dharam laughs beside you. We look like heroes, he says, though his smile doesn't quite reach his eyes. You glance at your reflection in a window. Dusty uniform, scarred hands. Eyes that have seen things no one at this station could imagine. Heroes, you echo softly. Or ghosts. The crowd cheers anyway. Reporters push through, notebooks in hand. One of them, a young Indian man with wire-rimmed glasses, asks in English, "Sir, is it true you fought tanks with lances?" You hesitate. The absurdity of it hits you all over again. "Yes," you say finally. "It's true." He shakes his head, half in disbelief, half in awe. "That sounds impossible." You smile faintly. It was. Later that evening, the soldiers gather in a reception hall, a grand colonial building with fans spinning lazily overhead. British officers give speeches. Medals are pinned. Hands are shaken. It's all polite applause and stiff smiles. Under the surface, there's something unsaid. You can feel it in the air. When Aman Singh receives his medal, he salutes crisply, then says quietly into the microphone, "We rode for honor, not empire." The room goes silent for a heartbeat before applause resumes, louder this time, but uneasy. That night, you step outside. The air smells of rain. The streets glisten under lamplight. You walk until the noise fades, until the city becomes whispers and shadows. Somewhere, a temple bell rings. Somewhere else, a gramophone hums an old tune. You stop by the water's edge, watching the waves slap against the stones. The reflection of the city shimmers on the surface, broken, beautiful, restless. You think of Haifa again, The charge, the roar, the sand flying like fire. Scholars still argue, you recall hearing once, whether bravery is born from madness or faith. Maybe it's both. Maybe that morning in 1918, it didn't matter what it was born from, only that it carried you through. As the rain begins to fall, you close your eyes and let it wash the dust from your face. It feels cleansing, almost merciful. Around you, the city hums quietly, a different kind of war continuing in its streets, of freedom, of identity, of the future waiting just over the horizon. When you return to the barracks, the men are already asleep. Dharam snoring softly, his hand resting on his old lance as if it's a memory he refuses to let go of. You lie down on your cot, listening to the rain drumming on the roof. For the first time, you realize you survived something the world won't remember, but you do. And maybe that's enough. The lights flicker and you drift into sleep. In your dreams, you see horses running, not toward war this time, but through green fields, manes shining, hooves light as wind. The next morning, you wake before dawn. The rain has stopped, leaving the air cool and clean. For the first time in months, there's no trumpet, no shouted order, no weight pressing against your chest. Just the slow rhythm of life returning. Faint sounds of vendors setting up their stalls outside, the call of a distant train, the whisper of monsoon wind through open shutters. You rise quietly, stretch your arms, and watch the first light spill across the barracks floor. Dust motes dance in the beam, golden and gentle. It feels like the world is rebuilding itself from silence. Aman Singh enters, tying his sash. He pauses at your bunk and says softly, "Orders have come. We're to report in Delhi next month. Parade duty." You chuckle. After Haifa, that feels like child's play. He smiles faintly. Perhaps that's the point. The empire prefers its heroes, polished and quiet. The words settle between you, heavy with meaning. Later that day, you and a few others take a short leave to walk through the city. Bombay feels both familiar and foreign. The markets are alive with color. Red chilies, green mangoes, blue glass bangles catching sunlight. The noise is overwhelming, but you find comfort in it. After years of commands and gunfire, this chaos feels human. At a small tea shop, you sit together under a tattered awning. The air smells of cardamom and rain-damp dust. The shopkeeper recognizes your uniforms and brings extra sweets, refusing payment. "For the men who fought for us," he says proudly. You exchange glances, a quiet irony passing through. "For us." You wonder who us really means. Dharam stirs his tea and says, "They'll forget soon, won't they?" You sip slowly. "Maybe, but we won't." A street urchin runs by, wooden sword in hand, pretending to charge invisible foes. You can't help but smile. Somewhere, the story of what you did has already turned into legend, reshaped by imagination. Maybe that's how history survives, not through reports, but through stories whispered by those who never saw the field. In the evening, the city glows amber under the gas lamps. You and Aman stand near the gateway, looking at the sea. Ships come and go, soldiers boarding for other lands, merchants unloading spices and silk. The world is moving again, even if the scars are fresh. You ever think of what comes next? Aman asks quietly. You nod. I think about it too much. He chuckles. Then stop. The next battle isn't always fought with weapons. Then with what? You ask. He looks at the horizon where the last of the light fades into gray. With memory. The words linger long after he's gone back to the barracks. That night, unable to sleep, you take out the small journal you've kept since the campaign began. Its pages are stained, corners bent, the ink faded from sweat and rain. You turn to a blank page and begin to write, Haifa, 1918. We charged through fire and steel. We rode into history, though no one asked us to. Your pen hesitates. You glance at the men around you, sleeping soundly. Then you continue, slower this time. If the world forgets, let it. We remember enough for them all. You close the book and place it under your pillow. The candle flickers, then dies, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. Outside, somewhere far beyond the city, thunder rolls, soft and distant. It sounds almost like hooves. You wake to the whistle of a train the next morning, long, mournful, and fading into the humid air. It reminds you of the bugles that once called you to battle, but this sound is softer, more human. Bombay Station is alive again, filled with movement and noise. Families cling to each other, porters shout, pigeons flutter from the rafters. You and your squad stand at the edge of the platform, bags slung over your shoulders, bound for Delhi. The brass buttons of your uniforms catch the light, still polished, still perfect, though the men inside them have changed. You've all seen things that uniforms can't hide. The train heaves and groans as it begins to move, wheels clattering like drums. You lean out the window as the city blurs by, smoke from the engine mixing with the smell of rain-soaked earth. Dharam hums a folk tune under his breath, low and nostalgic, something about rivers and returning home. Hours pass. The landscape shifts from palms to dry plains, from the scent of salt to dust. Villages appear and vanish in a blink. Children waving, women drawing water from wells. Somewhere along the way, you realize how large this country is and how small one battle feels against its endless sprawl. By the time you reach Delhi, the sun is setting. The city is a patchwork of domes and narrow streets, glowing under lanterns. Soldiers march in neat lines outside the Red Fort, the Empire's banners fluttering lazily in the evening wind. You disembark, boots clicking against stone, and are led to your new quarters, neat barracks near Raisina Hill, not far from where colonial officers hold their evening banquets. That night, the air smells of jasmine and coal smoke. You and Aman sit on the steps, watching fireflies blink in the grass. They say this is the capital of peace, Aman murmurs. Funny, isn't it? Built by men who've never seen war up close. You nod. Maybe peace only looks real when it's far away from the battlefield. He laughs softly. You sound like a poet now. You shrug. Maybe Haifa turned us into philosophers. For a moment, silence. Then distant music drifts from the officers' club, a gramophone playing a British waltz. The melody floats over the dark city, too fragile to belong to this world. A courier arrives, handing you a sealed envelope marked confidential. You tear it open. It's not orders this time. Just an invitation to a commemoration ceremony for the Indian Cavalry's service in Palestine. You raise an eyebrow. Recognition at last? Aman smirks. Or a convenient photograph for the newspapers. The next day, you stand in formation under a blazing sun. Rows of soldiers in perfect symmetry, medals pinned, sabers gleaming. A British general gives a speech about valor and loyalty, about how the Empire could not have triumphed without her Indian sons. You stand motionless, face expressionless. The crowd claps. A photographer flashes his bulb. Later, you find the newspaper, your regiment's name, printed in small type below the general's. No mention of Haifa, no mention of the tanks, or the chaos, or the men who didn't make it home. Just distinguished service rendered. That night, you sit by a window, the city humming below. You can still hear the ocean from your memory, and the gallop of your horse on that impossible day. You whisper his name, the animal's name, into the darkness. It feels like prayer. Outside, fireworks burst over Delhi, marking the king's birthday. The sky blooms with color, red and gold, for a few fleeting seconds. The lights fade, smoke lingers, and you realize every victory, no matter how bright, always leaves smoke behind. You wake before dawn, the faint glow of the city filtering through your barrack window. For the first time in months, you don't have to report for duty. You sit quietly on your cot, tracing the grain of the wooden floor with your boot. The world outside hums with a low promise of change, of something stirring beneath the surface. The newspapers speak of revolts, whispers of freedom. Gandhi's name is on everyone's lips. You hear men arguing in tea stalls. Some loyal to the crown, others ready to break the chains. Yet among your regiment, silence reigns. The soldiers who fought for the empire now stand between two worlds, unsure which side history will choose for them. You walk to the parade ground. It's empty, except for a few horses grazing by the fence. Their tails flick lazily at the flies. You recognize one, a younger mare, the color of morning fog. She reminds you of your old mount, lost at Haifa. You reach out, brushing her neck gently, feeling her warmth, her breath, the rhythm of something pure that hasn't learned betrayal yet. That's when you realize the war didn't end in Haifa. It simply changed shape. Weeks pass. You're transferred again, this time to a quieter posting near Lucknow. The city's Nawabi architecture stands like a dream of another time. Arches, courtyards, shadows filled with music that never stopped echoing. Your days fall into a slow rhythm. Morning drills, noon rest, evening walks along the Gomti River. The air smells of sandalwood and dust. The war stories begin to feel distant, like someone else's memories. But some nights, when the power cuts and the lantern flickers, you see the battlefield again. Flashes of smoke, the shimmer of bayonets, the faces of men who followed you into fire. You write letters to families of fallen comrades, to commanders who never replied, to no one in particular. You don't send them, just fold them and tuck them beneath your mattress, as if words themselves could bear the weight of ghosts. One afternoon, a young recruit approaches you, bright-eyed, barely 20. He salutes sharply. "Sir, they say you were in the charge at Haifa. Is it true?" You nod slowly. "It's true." "What was it like?" he asks, eager, expectant. You pause. The easy answer would be glorious, but truth is heavier than that. "It was like galloping through a storm." You finally say, "Every breath tasted like fire." You didn't think. You just moved forward, because stopping meant death. He hesitates, unsure if he should smile. And was it worth it? You look past him to where the river glints under sunlight. "Ask me again when the world remembers what we did," you murmur. That evening, you visit the regimental archive, a dusty room stacked with ledgers, faded maps, rusted sabers. You find the record book from the 15th Imperial Service Cavalry Brigade. You flick through pages until you reach Haifa, September 23, 1918. There it is, a single paragraph, handwritten in precise ink. Enemy tanks neutralized, city secured, casualties moderate, objective achieved. You stare at it. No mention of the blood, the horses, the sandstorm of bullets. No mention of bravery beyond numbers. You close the book, dust floating in the sunlight, like snow. History forgets what doesn't flatter it, you whisper to yourself. But memory is stubborn. Outside, children chase kites in the sky, their laughter cutting through the evening air. You watch them, and for a moment, it feels like everything might still be all right. The call to prayer echoes from a nearby mosque, soft and melodic. The world pauses, listening. And in that silence, you make a quiet promise that someday, when the noise of empire fades, someone will tell the story properly. not the Empire's version, not the general's, but yours. The story of the Lancers who rode into fire and returned with nothing but honor and silence. You spend your remaining years chasing the quiet. It follows you sometimes, in the rhythm of hooves on dry earth, in the rustle of wind through palm trees, in the rare nights when sleep comes without ghosts. But mostly, it hides. Your regiment disbands. Flags are lowered, medals boxed away. You're offered a pension, a few polite words, and a seat at a veteran's table where no one remembers Haifa anymore. The younger officers speak of tanks now, and strategy and politics. Not horses, not the charge that changed a city's fate. You begin to write, not letters this time, but memories. Scribbles on loose sheets of paper. A memoir, maybe, or just a confession. You write about dust storms and gallops, about faces you can no longer name. You write that courage is not absence of fear, but movement through it. You write that every man carries a war long after the battle ends. The years blur. The world changes faster than you can hold it still. Radios hum. Empires collapse. Lines are redrawn on maps. The land of Haifa becomes Israel, a new country rising from the bones of an old one. You hear about it from a British officer in Delhi, sipping gin as he talks of that little skirmish that turned into a nation. You smile faintly. You were there when the storm began. Scholars still argue whether that battle truly mattered, whether the charge of Indian Lancers changed anything at all. You could tell them it did, not in maps or treaties, but in spirit. But you've learned that truth, like memory, isn't always welcome in the halls of power. So you stay silent. Sometimes, at dusk, you walk down to the train station just to watch the world move. Steam hisses, whistles cry, and the platforms fill with faces. Merchants, soldiers, wanderers. You listen to their stories, their laughter, their weariness. Every voice seems to carry a piece of something you've lost. Once, you meet a traveler from the Middle East. He's old, like you, wears a keffiyeh wrapped loose around his head. The two of you share a bench, a cigarette, and silence. "Where are you from?" he asks in broken English. "India," you reply. "Once a soldier, long ago." He nods, slowly, studying your uniform's faint insignia. "Haifa?" You turn sharply. His eyes hold a flicker of recognition. "My grandfather said, horsemen came from the east. Brave men. They fought like the wind." You exhale, smoke curling in the cold air. "We just rode where we were told." But deep down, something stirs. A warmth, fragile as ember. Someone remembers. The man smiles, touching his heart. "Still, you came, and we still talk of that day." He leaves on the next train, his shape dissolving into smoke and distance. You stay, watching until the lights fade, whispering into the night. That's enough. In the months that follow, your steps slow. Your hair turns white, your letters fewer, but your words, the ones written by lamplight, begin to spread. A historian in Bombay writes to you, saying he found your account curiously vivid. Another from London calls it apocryphal but fascinating. You chuckle. History still doubts the truth, even when it's written in blood. The younger officers who visit sometimes call you sir. You correct them gently. "I was just one among many." And maybe that's the truest thing you've ever said. One evening, when the monsoon clouds roll heavy over the horizon, you sit by your window with your old diary. The ink has faded, but the words still breathe. You whisper them aloud. Names, places, promises. Each syllable feels like a prayer. You remember Haifa not as a battle, but as a moment when men became something more than soldiers, something eternal, unrecorded, but unforgettable. As thunder breaks over the rooftops, you close your eyes. The storm sounds almost like hooves again, pounding toward a destiny no one ever planned. The world will forget, as it always does. But tonight, you remember. And remembering is its own kind of victory. Years later, when even the echo of gunfire feels like something from another life, you find yourself drawn to quiet places. The garden behind your small house in Lucknow becomes a sort of sanctuary, overgrown with bougainvillea, dotted with the kind of peace only the forgotten earn. Every morning, you sit with a cup of weak tea, watching the sun rise through the mist, and it feels like the only battle left is between memory and time. You never talk much about the war now. Not because you can't, but because you know words can't carry its weight. They stretch, they break, they betray. People want heroes and endings. You've seen too many beginnings that ended in smoke. Sometimes children from the neighborhood visit you. They sit cross-legged on the floor as you tell them about horses, not about war, not about death, but about their grace. How a cavalryman learned to breathe with his mount, to feel the rhythm of its heartbeat before a charge. Their eyes widen when you mention galloping through a desert or a city by the sea. "Did you ever fall, uncle?" one asks. You smile. "Only once, but I got back up." They laugh, and that laughter fills the house like sunlight after years of rain. You write one last letter to the regiment's archives. It's short, almost humble. You mention names of men you think deserve to be remembered. You close it with a single line. "We rode together, and the world forgot together." You seal it, not expecting an answer. In sleep it comes lightly now. You dream of the open plains, of wind tearing through banners, of a time before the world turned to machines and wires. You dream of Haifa again. Not the battle, not the smoke, but the morning after. A city stirring beneath golden light. Children chasing pigeons. Lancers riding back to camp, silent, tired, alive. Scholars still argue whether that charge mattered, whether it was the last cavalry victory in history, or just an echo of empire's dying breath. You almost wish they'd stop arguing, because you know the truth. It mattered to the men who rode. It mattered to the land that remembers them in whiskers. And maybe that's all history ever needed. Memory, not monument. Your body grows frail, but your voice stays warm. Some evenings, a local teacher records you speaking for her students, your slow baritone carrying stories that textbooks forgot. She tells you she wants to make sure her class knows that Indian soldiers helped shape the modern world. You nod, but say nothing. You've learned that history doesn't need agreement, just honesty. Then, one twilight, as the fan hums softly overhead, you feel a strange calm. You're sitting by the window again, looking west. The horizon burns faintly orange, as if the sun itself remembers that evening charge. You can almost see them, the silhouettes of riders, sabers glinting, moving through the haze. Your horse among them, waiting. You close your eyes. You're back there for one heartbeat. The sand, the thunder, the cry that split the silence of centuries. And for the first time in years, you don't wake in fear. You stay in that moment, steady, unbroken, part of something larger than all the forgetting. And then, there's stillness. The next morning, your housekeeper finds your journal open beside you. A single, unfinished sentence scrawled in your familiar hand. "Tell them we rode." She doesn't understand what it means, but somehow she feels it. She keeps the diary safe. One day, it ends up in a small museum display. The Indian Lancers at Haifa, 1918. Few visitors stop to read, but every now and then, one does. A student, a traveler, someone who likes forgotten things. They stand quietly before the page, reading your words, hearing faint echoes of hoofbeats in their mind. And just like that, the silence breaks again, because stories don't die, they wait. And tonight, under this whispering dark sky, you found your way back to one. You're still here, eyes heavy, mind somewhere between past and dream. Maybe you can hear them now, the horses, faint but steady, like distant thunder on the edge of a storm that never ends. That's how memory works. It fades, then returns in soft waves, asking you not to forget completely. You don't have to picture every detail. Just remember that once, under the same sky you sleep beneath now, men from another world rode into fire and didn't turn away. They didn't do it for medals, or flags, or history books. They did it because someone had to. The world may not tell their stories on loud stages, but somewhere, in a quiet house, or a late-night podcast, or a drifting thought before sleep, they live again. So as you lie there, letting the last echoes fade, know this. Every time you listen, you keep them alive. Every time you breathe in that stillness and let it stay a second longer, they ride again. Now let your eyes close. The wind outside will take care of the rest. The night will hold what history forgot. Sleep well, traveler. You've made it through the charge. End of script. Sweet dreams.